Welcome to the World Class Speaking podcast series. This is a place where you will learn how to present, persuade, and profit by improving your communication skills. Each episode in the series is a chapter from the book World Class Speaking in Action. And each chapter is written by a certified world class speaking coach. I'm your host, Matt Miller, and I've carefully crafted and summarized each chapter in the book. Have you ever attended a presentation and the speaker engaged the audience successfully? If the entertainment was fun and helped drive home a point, then you know the audience enjoyed it. In this episode, we're going to take a deep dive into activities and how they can be used to drive audience engagement during presentations. And this is episode 15, Using Activities for Engagement. And the author of this specific chapter is Monica Sagarto. And Monica Sagarto is a certified world class speaking coach as well as a communications expert. And why is this episode important? Being able to effectively engage your audience is important because it allows for a much needed break in the action, time for your audience to get to know each other, and it will allow the audience time to reflect. Oftentimes, the activities during a presentation are the most memorable moments because you apply to yourself what you've learned. And in this episode, we're going to break it down into three chunks. First, talking about activities and specifically three things that an activity needs to do. And then we're going to talk about 5 things that the activity should do. And then I'm going to tell a personal story about how an activity that I experienced resonated with me. So, first, an activity needs to do the following 3 things. First, it needs to suit your speaking style. What are you most comfortable with? Do you want to ask a question and have people shout answers all from different sections of the stage? Or do you want everybody to break out into breakout groups and then have one person in the breakout group report back to you? Or do you want to give your audience time for reflection? Maybe you tell them to close their eyes, think of something in their past, and then potentially share it at the end. But think of something that suits your speaking style and use that as part of the activity. The second thing that it must do is that it must drive home the main point you're making. You cannot use an activity just to use an activity. It must be intentional to support the main message of your speech. And then third, you need to get your audience involved. The activity cannot just be with yourself or with one person. It has to engage the audience. The point of the activity is to create a memorable experience that supports the main message in your speech and it suits your speaking style. And if you can do these 3 things, then the activity will have a lot of value. And then next, an activity should include the following 5 things. Number 1 is it should be entertaining. Technically should not be doing an activity if it's not entertaining because it'll just bore the audience. The activity is supposed to lighten everybody up, get everybody excited and motivated. The second thing that it should do is promote interactivity. Activities are great ways for the audience to network with each other, which is a super big benefit of attending live in-person events. And it also gives the opportunity for the audience to connect with each other. Then third is that it should gain the audience's trust. And what I mean by that is it should be a valuable activity that the audience internally thinks that it makes sense to do it. Because if the audience isn't bought in, then they're not going to want to do it. And then you're going to lose credibility as the speaker. And then number 4 is that it should help them practice what you've preached previously. And then 5, it should instill a sense of accomplishment and pride. Once you accomplish an activity, you should be proud of yourself for doing the activity, and it should give you overall joy. I recently joined National Speakers Association Ohio, and during one of the live in-person events in Columbus, the keynote speaker got on stage, and her message was all about personal branding, teaching you how to build an effective personal brand and how you can resonate with your target audience. And one of the activities that she had us do was very powerful. She had us write down 5 words that you would describe yourself as. And then she waited a few minutes and then she said, okay, now Next to that, write down 5 words that your best friend would describe you as. And we went down and wrote down our 5 words. A couple minutes later, she said, okay, now write down 5 words that your audience or your fans would describe you as. And we wrote down those 5 words. And then she said, circle all the words that are the same in each of the 3 categories. And we would go and he would circle the words that were consistent in all 3 categories. And then she said, raise your hand if you have all 5 words that are the same across the board. Nobody raised their hand. And then she said, raise your hand if you have 4 words that are consistent across the board. And I think one person raised their hand. And then she said, 3 words. Some people raised their hand. Then 2 words, the majority raised their hand. 1 word, a lot of people raised their hand. And then 0 words that were consistent, and some people raised their hands. But most people had 1 word that was the same, maybe 2. Now, the goal of this activity would be to have all 5 words in each column be the exact same. Now, why is that? Because in the first category, we wrote down 5 words that we would describe ourselves as. This is what we think of ourselves when it comes to our brand and how we want to be viewed. This is the best version of ourselves. The second category is the 5 words that our best friend would describe us as. Now, this is the honest truth of how we would be described because our best friend knows us best, and his 5 words would be very close to the truth, whether we like it or not. And then the 5 words that our audience or fans would describe us as, this is what our audience is seeing when we post and what we showcase online. This will give us a good idea of how we're putting ourselves out there. If we can align all 3 of these sections and have 3, 4, 5 similarities, then we are well on our way to being the same person on the stage and off the stage, which will help us be our true, authentic, congruent, aligned version of ourselves. However, if we have 0 words that are the same, this should be a wake-up call that there isn't congruence and alignment between what we think of ourselves, what our friends think of us, what our fans think of us. The ultimate goal is to be the same person off the stage and on the stage and to have everybody think of us that way. Now, I don't remember a lot from that keynote speaker, but that activity I do remember. And that just shows how an activity can be one of the most important things throughout the speech. To summarize this episode, each of us needs to discover our unique activities that help us become remembered and therefore recommended as speakers. An activity that promotes reflection, connection, and learning will be remembered long after you leave the stage. An activity needs to include the following 3 things. 1, suit your speaking style. 2, drive home the point you're making. And 3, get your audience involved. And then it should do the following 5 things. Number 1, it should be entertaining. Number 2, it should promote interactivity. Number 3, it should gain your audience's trust. Number 4, it should help listeners practice what they learn. And 5, it should instill a sense of accomplishment and pride. Now that you understand how activities can be used to drive engagement in presentations, what is your signature activity? This needs to be an activity that is unique to you, causes reflection, and allows the audience to practice what you preached. As I mentioned in the story about attending the NSA event, National Speakers Association, on personal branding, the one thing that I remembered most from the presentation was that activity. That's the power of activities. I encourage you to create a new activity or expand on the one that you already have in place and to keep practicing it because that is what is going to differentiate you and get you more speaking engagements in the future. That wraps up this episode, and in the next one, you will learn how to create anchors that captivate, motivate, and activate your audience. That's all we've got for this episode on the World Class Speaking Podcast series. Until next time, remember that becoming a great communicator is so important because it leads to greater impact, influence, and income. Thank you for listening and have a great day.